we studied so much about alloys. Why are alloys important and why should we study about them? Since alloys, we said they are interstitial compounds or they are interstitial impurity defects in crystal lattice of transition metals, the properties of the alloys vary from those of the parent elements in many ways. And these are made use of in our day-to-day lives. For example, you see here we talked about these interstitial defects. Here there are present smaller atoms which are fitting into the hole of the bigger metal atoms. These are the interstitial impurities. Now they are added in correct proportion to form an alloy of the desired property. So there is one more type. I told you when the atoms are having a size which is very similar to that of the transition metal atom, then it can replace the transition metal atom and completely form an alloy which is called the substitution impurity defect alloy. These are those metal atoms. We saw in case of copper and zinc, copper and tin, some of the atoms of copper were being replaced by zinc or by tin. Now here, what are the changes in the properties? Due to change in the structure of the crystal lattice, the alloys show high ductility, low strength or high strength and low ductilities depending on the rate of cooling during formation. So they will either have high ductility and low strength or high strength and low ductility, and that depends on the rate of cooling during formation, if you cool it rapidly or whether you let it cool on its own slowly. Alloys have different melting points than either of the component metals, and this makes them useful as hardeners. For example, gallium. Obviously, as the name suggests, you can easily find out that it is made up of gallium. And of course, there are transition element metal atoms too in that alloy. The reflectivity of alloys change and make them more useful than parent metals. Low density, improved electrical properties, lighter weight make these alloys useful in different ways. As we have seen already, that some of the alloys are used even in aeroplanes, obviously which needs lightweight. Some are used in ships, in propellers. There they need to be corrosion resistant, and that's how alloys find their use in our lives. Next, now we said about the catalyst. How do these catalysts behave? Some of the transition metal atoms act as catalysts. Now, what is the importance of the catalyst? Why do we need to have reactions in which we can have without catalyst also the same product being formed? For example, if you have a carbonyl compound, say an aldehyde or a ketone, compound A reacting with compound B. So there are two different aldehydes over here, and they would have given me different products like this. See the configuration, the arrangement of the atoms of the hydroxyl groups and as well as that of the carbonyl compounds. It is either an AB configuration or it can be AA configuration as well as BB configuration. That means actually the OH groups are on top. They are adding on top across a double bond, but A compound can combine with B compound to form an AB diol. A compound can combine with itself and give an AA diol. B compound can combine with itself to give a BB diol. So we have got three possibilities if we do not use a catalyst. If you use a copper catalyst, you will exclusively get the AB diol. Now, compounds of transition metals are also useful. For example, vanadium pentoxide, and we will soon see how it does the catalytic effect. How do they lower the activation energy? If you study it graphically, you will find if you plot a graph of potential energy versus reaction coordinate, then the potential energy of the reactants is lowered when using a catalyst. So obviously the reactants will quickly convert into products than it was without the catalyst, where the activation energy is very high. Here we see how hydrogenation takes place in presence of nickel or metal such as platinum, palladium. This is the catalytic metal, the metal surface. We pass hydrogen gas over it at a particular pressure. the hydrogen immediately ionizes and becomes hydrogen atoms, and they get stuck on the metal surface, that is, they are adsorbed. Next we are passing the carbon-carbon double bond containing compounds, that is, say for example ethylene, and that is also in the gaseous state. See how ethylene gets adsorbed on the surface of the catalyst. Then one by one the double bond will take away the hydrogens from the surface where it was already adsorbed, and you get a cis addition product. This is also called syn addition. So we have got now from ethylene we have got ethane. Again, in that contact process where I told you vanadium pentoxide is used as a catalyst to form H2SO4, we have first sulfur dioxide gas is getting adsorbed on the surface of vanadium pentoxide. Then that adsorbed sulfur dioxide reacts with vanadium pentoxide and forms SO3, which is also adsorbed. It is not in the gas form anymore. It is adsorbed as the gas molecules on the surface of vanadium pentoxide. It is not free. And you have V2O4, which is now a solid, that is the catalyst surface. SO3 adsorbed now converts into SO3 gas. I told you catalysts never form any permanent bonds. Now what happens? That one oxygen atom has been released. We show that as half oxygen, giving you half oxygen gas from SO3 has been converted into oxygen adsorbed. Okay. Now is it from SO3? No, we are passing oxygen over it, right? Now what has happened when we are passing oxygen to over SO2 on vanadium pentoxide? Literally speaking, SO2 takes away the oxygen from vanadium pentoxide, and the oxygen we pass over the surface of the catalyst gets again back to the catalyst to form V2O5. See here, V2O5 has now adsorbed that adsorbed oxygen which we had given in the form of oxygen gas, and it has formed V2O5. Again, there is one more process of the Haber's process of synthesis of ammonia, and this entire mechanism of catalysis in fact brought the scientists their Nobel Prize. How the mechanism is? The catalyst is what? Iron metal. So iron metal surface provides the bench for the hydrogen molecules and the nitrogen molecules to split up into atoms when they get adsorbed on the surface, and then the following series of reaction occurs. Each step is reversible. Remember, the space between the atoms of the Fe, you can see here the spaces between the atoms of the Fe, they help the nitrogen atoms to get adsorbed from the nitrogen molecules. So the moment nitrogen molecule comes in contact with the surface, it will split up and sit itself, or it will just fit into the space between the Fe atoms. So first nitrogen gas is forming nitrogen adsorbed on the surface of the Fe catalyst. Hydrogen gas again does the same thing. So when we pass nitrogen and hydrogen over Fe surface, that is iron surface, again they also get adsorbed on the surface. Some of them sit inside in between the interstitial spaces on the surface, some sit directly on the surface itself. So here iron is finding its position on the surface of the metal atom. Hydrogen is finding on the surface of the iron metal. Nitrogen adsorbed is giving me now nitrogen atom in the gaseous state. This is one of the slowest step involving the tight holding of nitrogen atoms on the adsorbed bent surface. So the bond between nitrogen, remember, is a triple bond. It's not that easy to break it. So when nitrogen atoms are being formed on the surface of the Fe catalyst, it's going to facilitate my reaction because I need nitrogen and hydrogen to react to give me ammonia. So now you can see here nitrogen atom on the surface reacts with hydrogen atom on the surface and gives me NH, simple, NH adsorbed. But nitrogen has got 3 unpaired electrons, remember, 3p3. So it will be absorbing 3 such hydrogen atoms. So next NH will take up one more hydrogen which is adsorbed on the surface and form NH2. Again NH2 will take up one more hydrogen adsorbed and give me NH3. NH3, which is now adsorbed on the surface of iron, will finally get dissolved, and this is an irreversible process. It will give me NH3 gas, which we need in the formation of NH3 by Haber's process. Now you have seen how transition metal atoms act as catalyst. Then they form colored compounds, they show different oxidation states, and they are good conductors of heat and electricity. They show metallic behavior. Why do they show metallic behavior? We will soon learn. Let us see how the groups 3 to 12 of periods 5 and 6 behave. Here also you can see that the next series, which is this series going to be now, there is going to be the 4D series from yttrium to cadmium. Okay, so yttrium, zirconium, niobium, molybdenum, technetium, ruthenium, rhodium, palladium, silver and cadmium. They form the 4D series. That is, the 4D orbitals are in the process of getting filled, and they also show very similar properties. Again, they will also form the set of transition elements if they have their n-1 d orbital incomplete or partially filled in the ground state or in the most common oxidation state. So, cadmium, for example, will then not be considered in the transition metals series, or it will not be considered as a transition element. Why? Because cadmium has got 4D10 and 5s2 as the configuration. The highest oxidation state you can see reached by the 4D series elements is +8, shown by ruthenium, and +7, like manganese in the 3D series, is shown by technetium here. Okay, now what about the next series, the lanthanide series of elements which come in the 5D series. Now these 5D series have lanthanides, I told you already, and they are having the block of elements as lanthanum, hafnium, tantalum, tungsten or wolfram, rhenium. Then here you have osmium, this is iridium, platinum, gold and mercury. So rhodium was there in the which series of elements? 4D. This is rhenium. This was ruthenium, which was showing +8 oxidation state, and here just below ruthenium we have got osmium showing +8 oxidation state. So the highest oxidation state in the 4D series is by ruthenium, in the 5D series is by osmium. Mercury again can show two oxidation states, the +1 and the +2. Mercury is the only metal over here which is in the liquid form.